This is the Elbrus, designed and produced by Vic Lin at Tuff Gear. If you're interested in hearing my thoughts on this knife, keep watching. Before we get started, I do want to thank Vic for sending out the Elbrus so that I could share it with you. Now, the quick backstory is I had asked Vic to send out another knife that I've previously reviewed, and when I did, Vic said, can I send along the Elbrus for you to review at the same time? Now, honestly, if Vic hadn't offered it, I don't know that I would have requested it because, well, I didn't think it was going to be my style of knife. This is a combat utility knife, and I think the emphasis is on combat with this knife. But what we're going to do today is we're going to try out the utility aspect of it. Just how useful is it for use out here in the woods? All right, so what we'll start off by doing is take a closer look at the knife where I'll go through the specifications and its features. Then, of course, we'll start the demonstrations. Before we focus in on the knife, let's take a quick look at the sheath. So the sheath is like all the other ones that Vic does at Tuff Gear. Heavy-duty Kydex, pancake style, lots of eyelet rivets all the way around, gives you lots of options for mounting this, whether it's using the belt loop we'll talk about or other means, maybe lashing. So that's nice. There is the drain hole on the bottom. The attachment for this is a Kydex bracket on the back. It is reversible to set up for left-hand carry, makes it very easy. And the belt loop, heavy-duty nylon that has Velcro and a dome snap to make it easy to get on and off your belt and still give you lots of security there. Now let's do the retention test. First off, it snaps in very nicely. Let's give it the shake. Not coming out. Didn't expect it to, and the reason being is how well designed the sheath is around the forward part of the handle and how it grips and how very closely formed it is. And that, I believe, is done with the vacuum process that at Tuff Gear. It makes for a very secure sheath, yet it is still very easy to push off. Oh, I just want to show you this before we move on. Vic has been doing this for a little while now. There's an extra eyelet right up here where the thumb ramp is, and that's done for a very specific reason. It may help keep the knife in the sheath, but more importantly, when you push it off, the Kydex doesn't open up and pinch your thumb. But it does come out easy enough. All right, we're going to go into the specifications for the Elbrus before we start talking about its design. So let me grab my notes. The wind decided to take my notes across my campsite. I had to go grab them. Okay, so we'll start with the specifications. Tip to pommel is 12.2 inches. Oh, by the way, before I go on, somebody asked me recently, why am I not giving you the specifications in metric as well as imperial? And the simple reason is time. It just takes up a little bit more time for me to do both. And I know this is going to sound like an excuse. I grew up at a time here in Canada before we adopted the metric system, so I learned from very early age to use the imperial system, then had to make that switch over. Those people in my age category will say often think back and forth. I think in imperial before I think in metric, so that's another reason why. But I will put all the specifications in the video description that'll have both imperial and metric. Right, now back to the specs. As I mentioned, tip to pommel 12.2 inches, blade length is 6.7 inches, blade thickness is 0.196 of an inch, which is, I'll give you the metric here, 5 millimeters. This is a bit misleading because it doesn't look that thick, and that's in part due to the swedge all the way up the back spine of the knife. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Steel is the steel that Vic has been using for his carbon steel choice of late, which is Bohler K329, hardened to between 58 and 60 on the Rockwell scale. It is a semi-stainless. It has more chromium than some of the previous carbon steels that is used, but it's not quite at D2 level. It's not a super steel, but boy, it is certainly tough for sure. The weight of the knife by itself, 14 ounces. If you add in the sheath, it brings it up to 15.9 ounces. The handles or scales are made of 3D machine G10, and in this case, it is a gator pattern on top of a black, green, and brown coloring. Okay, so that's all the specifications out of the way. Let me put my notes down before they blow away again on me again. Now let's get into the design. So in the opening, I referred to this as a combat utility knife, and that's exactly what it was meant to be. If you take a look at it, that blade screams combat. Now, the tip, and it is almost center point, it is almost a spear point, and because of the tip and the swedge, which runs to here, This is designed for penetration, pure and simple. That's what this is all about. So this is a combat knife first, a utility knife second, and whether or not it makes a good woods knife, well, that's what we're going to take a look at in a moment. So that's the overall blade design. I will tell you a couple of things that I've, in my experience so far with the knife, in testing it, that has both a plus and a negative. Because of that swedge, it chews up on my batons very, very quickly. The nice thing is they're free. It's just another piece of wood. I can make myself a new baton and we're free to go. But the thing is that's nice about it is as I'm batoning through a piece of wood, unlike a lot of knives that would have a high saber, which is basically the grind that this has, high saber with a convex secondary, a lot of them, if it's flat up here, that's where it grabs onto the wood, or the wood grabs onto the knife. This means that once it passes through here, then it's free. So really, it's just the primary grind that's going through the wood or has any contact through the wood. The top part is not contacting the wood at all. So it does make it a little easier to baton, but at the same time, it chews up the batons fairly quickly. Okay, now moving back, we have a thumb ramp. The thumb ramp is chamfered or rounded on both sides. It is kind of raised up. It is effective, but it's not something I'm going to use a whole lot of. Right below the thumb ramp is a finger choil. Now, I do have a comment on this. I'm not sure if I would sooner that Vic did not put the choil on or made it bigger. And the reason being is when I'm trying to choke up on the knife and use this for feather sticking specifically, and I want to move my finger into that choil and I want to hold it like this, I cut myself. I've done it twice on the knife. The finger choil is kind of small. Maybe it's my large fingers, I'm not sure. But if I grab onto it like this, I'm right now in contact with the edge. So after this video, I will be chamfering that forward a little bit just to take that edge away from my finger. Yeah, small cuts, but no big deal. Actually, I think there's still the scab of this last time I did it. Now, if you hold it like this, it's not an issue. But if you really want to move forward and have lots of pressure and lots of control over it for feather sticking and carving, then that finger choil is a little bit too small. Now, there are, on the handles moving down, there are some thumb scallops. They're very shallow, but they're enough that you can use the knife in the pinch grip comfortably. By the way, this is a reasonable knife to use for camp chores such as food prep. It's got the high grind and just enough of a belly that you can rock the knife cutting meat up or vegetables up and that type of thing. So it works pretty good for that. So you do have the ability to do a pinch grip here. You also have the ability to do a reverse grip on it and use the thumb ramp and put your finger right up on the blade, and I will be demonstrating that in a few minutes. However, it's kind of another one of those double-edged things, to use a pun. Vic's handles, this is the standard design he uses on most of his knives. He usually scales it up or scales it down depending on the knife itself. Is a true anatomic dream, mostly. Can you see the shape of it? Coke bottled, lots of swelling. Oh, there's no hot spots on this at all. Now, besides being a little bit thin for me, easy enough to fix with a couple of liners would bring it out, make it a little fatter. The thing that I find is on a combat knife and maybe a combat utility knife, it's great. You lock in and it's not coming out of your hand. Forward thrusts, reverse thrusts, if you're jabbing it into wood, we'll say, or anything else, you've got great control over the knife. But when I want to use it in reverse grip, that's where it gets a little uncomfortable, because between the beak at the bottom and the guard at the front, my hand is in contact with both. Now, the way I get around that is I don't put it in a full reverse grip. It's kind of like a 3/4 reverse grip with my thumb way up here on the blade. I can do it, it'll work. It's just not as comfortable for me than maybe some other knife designs that don't have quite the same beak and guard up here. Moving on the way back, we have the hidden lanyard hold, and yes, I have a piece of green paracord on it. Now, I've made the loop on this a little longer than I might on other knives, because this will allow me to insert my thumb, or my baby finger here, like you can see I'm doing now, grab the very aft part of the handle right around the pommel where the bird's beak is, and use this knife for chopping. Snap chopping, not taking down trees. That's not what this will do, because it is a fairly lightweight knife, fairly nimble in the hand. It is not overly blade heavy on it. Let's just see if I can find, I never really do this much because it's not all that relative. So it's slightly blade heavy. Yeah, there we go. It's just where the choil is. So that means it's slightly blade heavy. I mean, it should be, right, at almost 7-inch blade. But it's still nimble enough that you can move very quickly with it, which is what you want in a combat knife. but not the weight that you need for chopping. So if you want to do some chopping with it, absolutely you can. But if you looked at buying this for the purpose of chopping, choose something else. Don't buy it for that reason. Okay, that's the basic design. So the question now that remains to be answered is, can this combat utility knife actually be used out in the woods for utility purposes? Let's check it out. All right, it's entirely possible that I chose too big a piece of wood for this test, but I've been using this knife now and splitting quite a bit of wood with it, and it's done an excellent job at it. But what I decided to do is I'd just take it to that next level, something outside of the range I'd normally split with a knife, just to see how much work it would be to get through it. This is a huge piece of sugar maple, rock maple. This is, yeah, every bit of 16 inches in length, at 4 inches in diameter, maybe 3.5 on that, 4 inches in diameter. Knot here, and another knot here. You could actually have trouble going through that with an axe unless you use a full-size axe for it. But today we're going to baton through this just to see how much work it's going to be. And I expect it's going to be a bit of work as well. All right, where is my baton? Spans it. So that's number one, right? I don't normally like hitting handles of knives with a baton to straighten it out. With the G10, it's reasonable to do. I'm not hammering very hard, but not a good practice in general. Generally, though, of course. That would be the way I'd normally do it. Broke my baton. All right, I have to find another baton to keep going with this test. All right, there's a good chance I'm going to regret having done this, only because of the amount of work. So here we are. We are still stuck in this piece of wood. Now, I have a huge piece of oak, about 20 inches in length. Plenty heavy to do the work. Maybe not the easiest thing to baton, but I want to try and straighten the knife up a little bit here so I can get some wax on it. Let's see. You know what? I think I'm going through one of those knots. I surely am. I think we're almost there. Yeah. The hang-up was the knot. Oh, it sure was. Right through there. That's what hung me up there. But, all right. Will a baton, big pieces of wood? Absolutely. And of course, no damage, not expected. I mean, that's still smoking razor sharp. No damage, but then again, like I said, this is not my normal test for something that size, but what I will do is split it down and see if I can't get a few pieces of wood out of it that we can do a few more demonstrations with. And I have one of the splits off of that piece of wood, and it's way too long, obviously, to use for a tent peg. So I'm going to do a couple of things here. First off, I think what I'll do is I'm going to cut a piece off of it to bring it down to length, but I just want to demonstrate two alternative ways of putting a point on a stick. I will be doing reverse grip and chest lever just to give an idea how well, or how good that feels, but this is where that lanyard and holding way back can come in handy as well, of course. You know, one more here. And, you know, we have a point on it that easily to use for a tent peg, but that's not what I'll do with it. Now I'm going to cross baton, take that off, get something in maybe the 11-inch range here. This is definitely going to bounce, and this piece of wood is way too big for a baton. Ugh, buried the knife. All right, I've got to grab that. So here we go. We have the one we're going to use for a tent peg. Now I'm just trying to decide. I think what I will do with this is tap in my notch. Looks like my chopping block is coming apart a little bit here. Tap in my notch so that I can create where the guy line will be. All right, there is my stop cut in about a third of the way. an awkward piece of wood to do this with, but it's not round, it's kind of flat. Kind of doing a two-sided L7 notch. That's working, okay. Okay, so as far as carving notches goes, there are better knives. And the reason I say that is, it's effective, and I did make the notch that I was looking to make. Because of that swedge, it's so thin up here that when you're working off of your thumb, look how narrow that is. That's left a mark in my thumb. It's just not comfortable for doing push cuts like that for more than maybe 1 or 2 tent pegs at the most. It's just too thin for doing that. Effective? Can it be done? Yes. Is it comfortable? First knife I'd choose? No, it is not. All right, I am going to set up so I can do the chest lever cut in reverse grip on the other end. And again, this demonstration is all about how is it to operate the knife using it in reverse grip. And I know it's not going to be my first choice for doing this, but let's see, it's also not the best piece of wood for doing this. However, that high primary grind and convex secondary definitely slices. All right. No awards for that point, but it would work as a tent peg if that's what I was actually, in fact, making here, which I'm not. It's just a demonstration. Okay, what am I finding? In reverse grip, the issue is, as I mentioned, you have to kind of go in a 3/4 grip, at least I do with my hand, to get a purchase on it so that I can use it in the chest lever cut. The other thing is I have to start higher up the blade than I would like to because of the choil. I'd really like to start way down here so I can bring my hands together and get the maximum control so the leverage is not working against me as I draw it through the knife, or draw the knife through the woods. I have to start, well, be about 3/4 of an inch further down the blade in order to do this. Will it work? Yes. Again, wouldn't be the first knife I'd choose for doing it. Okay, so we have done the tent peg. Let's move on to making some feather sticks. I was noticing when I was looking at the splits I took out of that log that the very center was a little punky. Well, you don't know when you take a tree down sometimes just what the center is going to be like. So just to take a couple slices off here to get to some nice clean wood. Do the other end as well. That should do it. All right, feathering. You never know until you try. Some pieces of wood work out well, some don't. And this is where I'm talking about. I am going to try not to cut myself, but I want to be forward and have the edge as close to my hand as possible so that I have the most control and the leverage is not working against me as I push the knife through the wood. So let's just see what happens. So, oh, that's better. I was going to say I'm not getting any real pigtail type of curls, but I am. I just have to adjust my grip a little bit with it. Mostly it wants to dig in and give me big feathers, which have a place. They're, big feathers will still burn. My goal is to make the tiny... Let's go to the outside edge and see what it does. They're curling a bit better. All right, definitely not one of my best examples of creating a feather stick, or at least a partial feather stick. Not creating the smaller curls, the few pigtail ones, but not very many. And two things I can say about it. One is that high primary grind, which is pretty much a high saber, is great. Considering that this is a 5mm thick blade, you need that height and that grind to get the geometry to thin out enough at the bottom. The convex secondary that Vic's put on his knives, this is what's probably the only reason I can do any curls with this at all, it's because of those two factors together. It's just, you know, they work. And I guess having that long blade gives me a little bit of a run. So I'm not just pushing down, but if I forward angle it, it means I also can slice as I go down. And here again, it will feather. You can adapt your style to make this knife work for you, but it's not a knife that I would choose to start with to do any feathering with. That choil is right up and top, right there, and would cut if I grabbed it any tighter forward. Okay, that was feathering. Now let's do some scraping. All right, I have a little piece of wood for a capture for all the fuzz I'm hoping to create. Another one of the splits off of that big piece of wood. See if we can get a little fuzz using the spine of the knife. A little awkward. Okay, it is doing the job, but not really well. Now, is that the knife or is that the wood? Try the outside edge. I'm thinking it may have been the wood. So here's what I'm finding scraping so far, is that you have to understand, well, let's try that one more time. There is, on the back of the knife, there is the thumb jimping right here. There is a full thickness piece here, and then the swedge begins. I was trying to use the swedge, which has a nice sharp 90-degree spine. That'll definitely throw sparks in a second. But there is that 1 1/8 inch long piece right here. That's what I should be trying to do this with. I'll try it one more time. And that's a little bit better. If you come back here to this last inch, then you get a little bit better scraping performance. When you're out here, the knife is starting to do this as you try and scrape, okay? Let's do it with the fat wood. See that where this goes? I'm going to use that last little bit again. And that comes off easy enough. That works. Lots of little shavings of fat wood. Now, being a big knife, I hesitate to use this in the throwing spark method. First I'm going to try the pullback method, where I hold the knife and then pull the ferrocerium rod back. If that doesn't work, quite often what I like to do is go to this method where I lay the knife down and then pull the ferrocerium rod across the back of it, getting the gunk off here. All right, first thing we're going to do is that lit. Okay, so easy enough. If you hold the knife, pull back on the ferrocerium rod, and with a little practice, you can direct your sparks into your fat wood, and it will work. All right, that's the demonstration, so let's wrap this video up. All right, a few closing thoughts for the Elbrus, designed and produced by Vic Lin at Work Tough Gear. So my closing thoughts are this. This is a combat utility knife. Emphasis on combat. This, if you have a legitimate need for a combat knife as a working soldier, then maybe you want to take a look at this. You'll still get utility out of it, not the type of utility that I like to have out here in the woods, but it would have some capability beyond just being a combat knife. So combat utility, yes. Woods knife, not so much. Now, if you just happen to like the looks of this, and I gotta say I do like the look of this knife. It's just not a performance for the woods, a performance design or performance knife for the woods. Can you make it work? You can, but if you're going to spend your money and you're looking for primarily a knife to use out in the woods, Vic has a lot of other designs, his own as well as those from people like Alex at Aurora Borealis Knives, that would suit you much better. Again, if you're looking for a combat knife, then maybe this is the one that you want to choose. And I'll leave it up to you. All right, what I'm asking now is if you have any comments or questions about the Elbrus, put them in the comments section. I will, as I always do, of course, put all the specifications as well as the links to where you can take a look at this at Work Tough Gear in the video description. Don't be surprised by the time I post this video that the knife has run out, like they're out of stock. That's very common for Work Tough Gear. But if this is a knife that you feel you might be interested in, wait. Vic will produce it again. He always does. All his designs come around again. There may still be some of these available at the secondary, like DLT training, DLT trading. I put those links in as well, so you can take a look and see if the knife is there, if you're really that interested and you can't wait. And if you haven't already, make sure you join the Work Tough Gear group on Facebook, because knives do come and go through secondary sales there, so you never know. If this is really something you have to have, you may be able to find one there as well. All right, until next time, get out and explore and take that path less traveled, because it will make all the difference. Bye for now.